7 billion people. That's how many humans are alive right now. 7 billion. And the entire species nearly fit inside a single stadium. Not at the beginning of human history. Not millions of years ago when we were barely upright. After we had language. After we had fire. After we had everything that makes us human. We almost didn't make it. And the reason it happened is still out there, waiting. And it could happen again. Here is what most people picture when they hear human evolution, a long, steady climb. Cave paintings, tools, fire, language, building on progress, generation after generation, a species marching confidently forward through time. That picture is almost entirely wrong. The actual genetic record of our species looks less like a steady climb and more like a near vertical drop, followed by a desperate crawl back up. There was a moment, a real, datable moment in human prehistory, when the population of all living human beings on Earth collapsed to a number so small it defies comprehension. We are talking, depending on which genetic analysis you consult, about somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 individuals, total, on the entire planet. To put that in context, there are more people in a mid-sized shopping mall on a Saturday afternoon than there may have been humans alive on Earth during our species' darkest hour. Every single person alive today, 7 billion of us, spread across every continent, speaking every language, building every city, is descended from that tiny, terrified group. Which means the real question isn't how humans survived. The real question is what almost finished us, and what does it mean that we still don't know for certain? The evidence for this bottleneck didn't come from digging up bones. It came from reading our own DNA. In the 1990s and early 2000s, geneticists studying human genetic diversity noticed something that should not have been there. Or rather, something that should have been there and wasn't. Humans, for a species of 7 billion, are extraordinarily genetically similar to one another. Chimpanzees, our closest relatives, show far greater genetic diversity within their species than we do. And there are only a few 100,000 of them. That should be impossible. A large, widespread population accumulates genetic variation over time. The more individuals, the more variation. If humanity had always been numerous, we should be wildly diverse at the genetic level. We are not. The explanation geneticists arrived at is called a population bottleneck. At some point in the past, the human population crashed so severely that almost all genetic variation was wiped out. The people alive today are all descended from the small group that survived, carrying only the limited genetic diversity that group happened to possess. The timing, based on multiple independent genetic analyses, points to somewhere between 70,000 and 100,000 years ago. Around 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano in what is now Sumatra erupted. It was the largest volcanic eruption in the last 2 million years. It ejected roughly 2,800 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere, enough to trigger a volcanic winter lasting years. Global temperatures dropped sharply. Vegetation collapsed. Food chains fractured across entire continents. The Toba catastrophe hypothesis, first proposed seriously in the 1990s by anthropologist Stanley Ambrose, argues this eruption drove humanity to the edge of extinction. The genetic bottleneck and the Toba eruption land in the same narrow window of time. That overlap is not proven to be causal. Scientists still debate it, but the genetic bottleneck itself is not in serious dispute. The near extinction happened. What caused it is where the argument begins. The survivors were not special. That is the part no one wants to say plainly. The humans who made it through were not stronger, smarter, or more adaptable than the ones who died. They were geographically lucky. They were in the right microclimate. They had access to a coastline, or a valley, or a food source that survived when everything around it collapsed. The entire inheritance of human civilization, every idea, every language, every discovery that followed, traces back to people who survived because of where they happened to be standing. Not because of what they were. The genetic scar is still inside you. Every human being alive carries the mark of this event in their DNA. Geneticists call it reduced heterozygosity, a technical phrase for an absence, a gap where variation should exist but doesn't. Your genome has a silence in it that was carved out 74,000 years ago. You are not descended from all early humans. You are descended from the sliver that remained. The rest, potentially tens of thousands of years of accumulated human variation, experience, knowledge, people, vanished. No descendants, no trace. Gone as completely as if they had never existed. Genetic analysis of archaic human populations suggests that Neanderthals, who lived alongside anatomically modern humans for tens of thousands of years, before vanishing around 40,000 years ago, also showed signs of chronically low genetic diversity, suggesting their population had been small and struggling long before modern humans arrived in Europe. Denisovans, a separate archaic human group we only discovered in 2010 from a single finger bone in a Siberian cave, appear to have also maintained low population numbers across their entire known range. Multiple branches of the human family tree flirted with extinction repeatedly. Only one of them is having this conversation. The survival of that small group may have changed what it means to be human. Here's where it gets strange. Some evolutionary biologists have proposed that extreme population bottlenecks don't just reduce diversity, they can dramatically accelerate it. What up? When a tiny group survives and then rapidly expands, random genetic variants that were present in that group, variants that might have been rare or neutral before, suddenly become common across the entire new population. The explosion of behavioral complexity that archaeologists call the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, the sudden appearance of abstract art, long-distance trade, complex tools, symbolic thinking, began roughly 50,000 to 70,000 years ago, right after the bottleneck. Some researchers think these behaviors existed before in limited forms and spread through the bottleneck survivor population. Others think the bottleneck itself, by reshuffling a small gene pool rapidly, may have accelerated the emergence of the cognitive flexibility that makes modern humans distinct. The near extinction may not just have been something humanity survived. It may have been something that made humanity what it is. It could happen again. Probably not from a volcano, but conservation biologists have a concept called minimum viable population, the smallest number of individuals a species needs to sustain itself genetically over the long term without collapsing into inbreeding and dysfunction. For most large mammals, that number sits somewhere between a few hundred and a few thousand individuals. We were inside that danger zone once. Pandemic disease, agricultural collapse, nuclear exchange, climate-driven ecosystem failure. The precise mechanisms are new. The math is the same math that almost ended us 74,000 years ago. We have never been as numerous as we are now, and we have never been as capable of ending that number rapidly. Here is what this means for you, specifically and personally. You exist because of a chain of survival so improbable it should not have held. Every person in your ancestry, every single link going back 74,000 years, survived something. Famine, disease, cold, violence, catastrophe of some kind. If any one of them had died before having children, you would not be here. Not just unlikely, mathematically certainly not here. And further back than that, in the population that crawled out of the worst of whatever happened 74,000 years ago. The same logic applies with even higher stakes. Your ancestors were among hundreds, possibly low thousands of humans alive on the entire planet. They kept a fire going. They found food. They found each other. You are the outcome of the most improbable sequence of survival in the history of your species. That is not a motivational statement. It is a biological fact. The specific combination of genetic material that produced you, your exact nervous system, your exact brain, your exact capacity to be sitting here watching this and feeling whatever you feel about it, has never existed before and will never exist again. It came through a needle so narrow that almost everything that preceded it was lost. You are not ordinary in the sense that anything about your existence was guaranteed. Nothing about your existence was guaranteed. Nothing about our existence as a species was guaranteed. And yet here we are, both of us. There were people who did not make it. We did. Not because we were better, not because we were chosen, because of geography and chance and the specific arbitrary position of a few thousand people on a map when the sky went dark. The species that built every cathedral, wrote every symphony, launched every satellite, and asked every question that has ever been asked about the nature of existence. All of it runs through that impossibly thin thread. It held once. It is not guaranteed to hold. So the question worth sitting with, the one that doesn't have an answer you can look up, is this. What do you do with the fact that your being here was never supposed to be certain?